This is Shabbos Chaf Beis. So we said in the Mishnah whether a person could set up a lamp in such a way that an eggshell is dripping more oil into it, or whether the wick goes from the main base into a second bowl, and then whether that's allowed to be lit before Shabbos. We're going to discuss the different views regarding that. Let's just have a little bit of a review so understand what we're talking about. We know there's a machlokes of Shabbos Hill. Yerushalmi does not allow that once one starts a malacha on Friday, that malacha to continue on Shabbos, even if he's not actively involved. So in other words, according to Yerushalmi, if you light something, you're actively involved in burning all the flame throughout Shabbos. So why is oil allowed? Why is an oil lamp allowed to be lit on Erev Shabbos? So the answer is because in that situation, since basically the wick is touching all the oil, so all the oil is already technically absorbed and the malacha is already done. You finish the malacha by already having all the oil touch the wick and you absorbed it into the wick, even though the time hasn't happened yet. But so long as a person's not going to touch it, and so long as the person doesn't really see what's going on, even though even in a glass lamp, you could technically, but you don't really see second by second what's going on. So therefore, according to Shammai and Beis Hill, those three things are taken into consideration out, so then it's no problem. So now to talk about how an eggshell dripping more oil into a basin, or a wick going from one to another one, how that is also consideration for us to think maybe that it's not touching the entire oil, and therefore you shouldn't be allowed to light it on Erev Shabbos. Okay, now that we set that up, let's go on. Lo Yaakov Adam Sheperes Shalbeitza. A person may not perforate an eggshell, as we learned. Lama, why is that? Mishum Shalai Huschal Bechal Tipa Tipa. Because then the wick is not touching every single drop. There is a whole bunch of oil in the eggshell that has not reached the main basin yet, so the wick is not absorbing the oil from there. Or maybe he might forget and he might pour. Of course, there's a third consideration, like we talked about, that you can't see it, but obviously that doesn't change one way or the other in this situation. So those two considerations. Is a person going to adjust the lamp, either pour more oil in as it goes on, or maybe realizes, oh my gosh, it's going too much, I want it to get dark, he was going to take the eggshell away, that might be a problem. So what's the difference in these two shittas? Hahan Zuka Dilkan, because the containers that are made of, let's say, palm. And if you make it of palm, now it's a closed container. Obviously, it's another problem. It's not touching every single tipa. There also, with the palm container, it's not touching every single drop. But there, where you might forget, here you're not going to forget. It's closed in a closed situation, so therefore you're not going to forget yourself. It's going to be enough of guard either not to take it away or definitely not to add anything. So if the potter attached to the reservoir, then it's mutter. So let's think of it this way. Now all of a sudden you have the lamp where it's set up this way, where it drips in. It's still not touching every single drop. However, since it's one keli, it's one contraption, so maybe then we could say, okay, that's enough to be considered as touching every single drop. Plus, since it's attached, he's not going to take it away, so therefore we don't have any issues. Another thing is that if it's attached, you're not going to also see it, because while it's dripping inside the nair, there's a bottom reservoir and top reservoir, and the top one's attached, you can't remove it to see, so that actually takes away the whole thing where it's not touching. Because so long as you can't see that it's not touching, to you it looks like the top reservoir is full, the bottom reservoir is full, the wick is in, it looks like it might be touching everything. That is enough regarding nair on Shabbos to work. So, Shnaya he the shekula echad. It's different because it's all one piece. So Ella rather im chibra besid I bigusus. If the homeowner is the one who does it with plaster, then also he attaches it. That's fine also. So long as it's attached, it's one keli. So we're going to say that by nair, that's considered you started the malacha and finished it because everything else is a grumma within that one keli. Yos the Rabbi Yuda Kirate. Yuda follows correctly his own opinion. Rabbi Yuda says, Mashke Toipeya Chibor, a liquid that is sufficient to moisten is considered connected. So when he went from the main reservoir to a second reservoir, so long as there's the in between, there's the moistness that connects everything together, and therefore that moistness of the wick is enough to consider a connection. Tani, the Brisa taught, Psila achas b'shnei kaisos. If one wick was in two different cups, b'shnei ka'arais b'shnei tapchuyan, two bowls or two different platters, aser. It's aser. Rabbi Yudin mater. Rabbi Yudin says mater. Rabbi Chanina b'shnei Rabbi Pinchas. Rabbi Yudin says name Rabbi Pinchas. Rabbi Yudah Galatain. He's going to his own reasoning. He considers them attached. Rabbi Yudah says mashke toipei achibor. A little bit of liquid is sufficient. So therefore, he considers them attached. There's no problem. He's not worried because the wick is in the second bowl. He's not worried about you taking it away. To him, it's considered tipa b'tipa as being touched. He's also considered that you don't really see what's going on. And therefore, he's not worried that you're going to take it away because it's set up that way. Even though the bowls aren't attached, but since the wick is there, it's set up that way. It's enough to make someone know not touch on Shabbos. Okay, next halacha. Halacha hey. What happens if you extinguish a ner on Shabbos? So why are you doing it? And then we'll see whether it's pater, whether it's mutter, or whether it's aser. If you fear because of goyim or bandits, or because of a bad spirit, a feeling of bad spirit. So some translate this as melancholy, but that makes no sense because melancholy would not be a help with darkness. You don't help melancholy with darkness, you help melancholy with light. And then also the Mishnah says then, im b'shvil ha'choila shiyashano, because the choila wants to sleep. So first with melancholy, it's also like a sickness, and if he just wants to be alone and go to sleep, it's the same thing as a choila wanting to go to sleep. We're not talking about a choila sheyesh ba sakana. It just says a regular choila. We don't know if it's sakana or not. So therefore, melancholy is not seen the proper. Whether it's a spirit. Let's say it's a ruach ra, an actual spirit. So an actual spirit meaning like a ghost. And we know the Gemara talks about these type of spirits. The Gemara talks about all these demons and destroyers, usually in dark places. So again, what type of ruach ra is going to be helped by someone turning out the lights? Okay, that's what we have to think about. So then the Mishnah says, butter. It's putter. Putter avalaser, as we know. Kichas ner, but if he wants to spare the lamp, kichas al shamin, to spare the oil, chas al psila, or spare the wick, chayiv, then he's chayiv. Rabbi Yosi Paiter bechula. Rabbi Yosi says all of them are putter, chutz ben psila, except if you want to spare the wick. If they who isa pecham, because you're making it the charcoal, and therefore you're doing a malacha machshaves by burning out the flame, you're actually making the wick in the charcoal, or you're making the wick singed, and that helps the light again. You're doing something positive to it. Doing something positive, that's malacha machshaves. That's when you're chayiv. Otherwise, you're going to be putter. So, if one extinguishes a lamp because of the fear of idolaters, right? Goyim or robbers. Amar Rab Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Rab Shmuel Rav Yitzchak says, "If they goyim shakana, goyim shakana, and if they listim shakana, and robbers are shakana." So Rabbi Yosi asks, even if they listim shakana, if he's saying they're all shakana, this name mutter, it should be mutter, not putter. It's mutter. If both the goyim and the listim, the problem is doing it because of sakana, the vashas, you're allowed to go ahead and do malacha. So should mutter Rabbanan, the Kesarya Rabbanan, b'shem Rabbi Yosi ben Chanina mutter. They said it was mutter, so they have a gerus in the Mishnah that it's actually mutter, not putter. Ma bein hamatzil mima shabener. What is the difference between one who saves the oil from the ner or bein matzil mima shabazayis, so one from olive oil? So the Gemara is asking this: if I scoop out oil from the reservoir, what am I doing differently than having the oil in a olive? It didn't burn yet. It's not touching the wick. So why is that? So again, you have to look at it in the scope of why we allow a oil lamp to go on Shabbos. because we do consider all the oil already consumed from Shabbos. The person starts the malacha and he finishes it on Shabbos, but we allow it because we consider with oil that so long as it lights well, it's already done the second he lights. So therefore, Shrabin the Kesarian B'Shem Rab Shila de Nava, the Kesarian rabbis and Rab Shila de Nava, Loy Doim Amatzel Megufa Shabsila. There's no similarity at all between one who says oil from the wick, Lamatzel Chot Megufa Shabsila, or when it's outside of the wick. So in other words, in the olive, go ahead, save whatever you want. So long as it's within the same reservoir or within the same lamp as the wick, that means it already touched the wick. You're basically pulling it out of the wick. So all the oil inside a lamp is considered in the wick itself, not just in the reservoir. It's considered in the wick itself. It's already considered like it's burning. Outside, then it's not, obviously. So there's no difference. So that's why. So you can't just scoop out oil from the reservoir because it's already considered like it's in the wick. Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan says, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon, Shneim, Amru Davaracha, they both say one thing. Just as Rabbi Yosef would say that unless you need for the wick itself, Rabbi Shimon so too Rabbi Shimon says unless you need the object itself. If you don't need the object itself, then it's pater. So what need do you have for a wick? So Rabbi Ksarian, Rabbi Lazar, the Caesarean rabbis, and Rabbi Lazar, and Chanina, Geshem Shemshmai, Umnan Mecharchin Lane. The servants and professionals are Mecharech the wicks. What does Mecharech mean? So Ma Mecharchin Lane, what does it mean to Mecharech the wicks? Misoption Lane, to singe them. Because like it says in Daniel, Ushar Shehan La Hischarach. And Hischarach means that the hair of their head was not Hischarach, it was not singed. So they used to singe the tip of the wicks. That makes it light easier. And they were able to do it, and professionals and servants would do it because it would help with their wicks. People who obviously had very limited means would not light and then not light because then you're just wasting matches. But if you had matches to spare or you had light to spare, it's better to light them a little bit and then blow them out. So the time when you actually need them, they actually light easier and they light better. So therefore, it's a malacha machshavas. You're actually doing something positive to the wick. Taman Taninan, so we learned the mission there. Kal Hamekalkalin Turin, anyone who does something destructive is putter. Chutzmin Hamavir Min Ha'is Chabura, except for someone who burns and someone who inflicts a wound. Bar Kapra says, Afilu Eino Tzarach Dam, even if you don't need the dam, let's say usually you do it for the wound, you need the dam. He doing an act for the dam. Afilu ain't tzarich leifer. Here you're not doing it for the ashes. You usually do it. You burn to make charcoal. You need the ashes. Rabbi Yechanan says, "V'hu yishei tzarich dam." Just like one who needs dam, v'hu yishei tzarich afer, and one who also needs the ashes. So Masna Pelegi al Rabbi Yechanan. The Mishnah conflicts with Rabbi Yechanan. Shoyrei hidlik as Haggadah b'Shabbos chayiv. So this conflicts over there where we learn that if a shar sets fire to a haystack in Shabbos, then the owner is chayiv. But if the man does it, then he's pater. And the Mishnah says why? Because he's chayiv misa. So therefore, even though he didn't need the haystack, he wasn't trying to make charcoal. So therefore, he still is chayiv misa. So you can be chayiv misa even when you weren't doing a malacha b'Shabbos. There was coming a positive malacha out of it. You weren't creating something. You were just burning for destruction, and the reason why you don't pay is because the person's chayiv misa. So shayra yishahedlek as a god of Shabbos chayiv. Now the access of the haystack and fire on Shabbos is not shaloi l'tzayrich, and there was no need. The hachahu should look at the god of Shabbos potter, and the one that he did on Shabbos potter also without a need, and yet we still see that he's going to be chayiv misa. So today we turn to Brisa. Anyone who's liable to the death penalty, shaygeg may be chatos, that inadvertently he brings a chatos. So therefore we see that Rabbi Yechanan is saying that in this situation, why would it just say that he's pater aval aser? He's chayv chatos if he did it unintentionally, but we're saying because he only doesn't pay because he's chayv misa. So how does Rabbi Yochanan explain the Mishnah that says that one who lights a fire for no constructed reason is still held chayiv? So Rabbi Chanina berei de Rabbi Hill. Rabbi Chanina said to Rabbi Hill that acher sheilu l'tzorech haya mischayev b'nafshay, since the fire had to be lit for a need, he would be chayev for a death penalty. The kan afilu shelo l'tzorech yehei pater min atashlumin, and therefore here, since there is no need, then he's pater v'tashlumin. Min hada. So we prove the following: Maka behema shamenu umaka adam yamos. A person who strikes an animal to pay, and one who strikes a person shall be put to death. Ma maka behema loy chalta ba bein shageg lemezid. Just like when you strike an animal, we don't distinguish between be shageg or mezid, inadvertent or on purpose. L'chayvim amen, regards to paying money. So then one who strikes a person, you should not distinguish also between shogeg or mezid, to exempt it from mammon. So therefore it's like this. When a case is going to be chayiv misa, it's all inclusive. When you do it with intent, then it's chayiv misa. However, you don't do it with intent, you're also not chayiv to pay. So again, when he did an intent to be malacha on Shabbos, then he's chayiv misa, and then of course he doesn't pay. But if he does it without making a constructive act, and there was no intent, so then he's not only not chayiv in Shabbos, he's also not chayiv to pay in that situation. That's the Gemara learns out.